The New York Times reports the Trump administration is looking at plans for a military response in the event of conflict with Iran. According to the Times, President Trump was presented with a plan that would send 120,000 troops to the Middle East. The report is drawing comparisons to the lead-up to the Iraq War, which the U.S. entered nearly 18 years ago. The report comes as the Pentagon says Iran was behind recent attacks on ships near the Persian Gulf. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin reports from the Pentagon.
After inspecting the damage done to 4 tankers anchored just outside the Persian Gulf, U.S. officials say it is highly likely Iran's hardline Revolutionary Guards are responsible for the attacks. The hole you see in the stern of a Norwegian tanker is only the tip of a much larger gash that extends below the waterline, where Iranian frogmen are believed to have attached explosives to the hull. None of the tankers were American, but the U.S. has an interest in keeping the Persian Gulf open to shipping and has threatened to retaliate against Iran for any attack on America or its interests. The U.S. has already sent an aircraft carrier and B-52 bombers to the Persian Gulf, and the New York Times reported the Trump administration is reviewing plans to send as many as 120,000 more troops. President Trump denied that, but not in a reassuring way.
We have not planned for that. Hopefully, we're not going to have to plan for that. And if we did that, we'd send a hell of a lot more troops than that.
Spearheaded by President Trump's hardline national security advisor, John Bolton, the U.S. is applying economic sanctions to throttle the Iranian economy and threatening to use military force if Iran strikes back.
He has strong views on things, but that's okay. I actually temper John, which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
David Martin joins me now from the Pentagon. So, David, the president and Secretary Pompeo are downplaying the New York Times report, but what are the implications if it is true?
Well, that is a worst-case scenario. That is what the U.S. might have to do if Iran were to launch attacks against Americans and to go back to working on a nuclear weapon. And as you can just tell from the number, 120,000, it's a very unappealing option both to the U.S. and to Iran, because ultimately Iran would suffer more. But just to give you some idea of what we're talking about here, at the peak of the war in Iraq, the U.S. had 130,000 troops. Iran is twice as big as Iraq and has 3 times more population. So this is an entirely different scale that you'd be operating on. And as the president said today, if he has to send more troops, it would be a lot more than 120,000.
Well, David, the head of Iran's National Security Foreign Policy Committee denies that the country was behind the sabotage of the ships near the Persian Gulf. Do we know what sort of evidence the Pentagon has that they, in fact, were behind it?
Well, inspectors have been to those ships and looked at them. Americans who know what they're looking at when they look at the aftermath of explosions. And what they found were holes in the hull that looked a lot larger than the pictures we've seen, because most of the damage was done underwater. And the analysis is that these holes were caused by explosive charges being placed against the hull by underwater swimmers. So you've had 4 ships attacked in the course of one day, and they were all covert attacks. And that's a pretty difficult operation to pull off. And so the analysis is that only the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in that region would have the capability to pull that off. Now, having said that, an official from the Gulf that we talked to said more investigation is needed. And he also said that they want to bring in investigators from other countries other than the United States, so that there will be more confidence that the U.S. isn't just coming up with the answer it wants.
Well, meanwhile, Iran-backed Houthi rebels say they have carried out drone attacks on oil stations in Saudi Arabia. The Saudi government is calling it an act of terrorism. Could that be seen as a sign of escalation?
Well, it certainly is a sign that Iran is not reining in its proxy forces. Iran is pretty open about its support for those Houthi rebels. And in fact, in the past, it's actually boasted that it has told the Houthi rebels to carry out attacks on Saudi oil tankers. Now, you would think if Iran is really going to pull in its horns in response to these American threats, that it would have gotten the word to the Houthis that maybe they should cool it for a while, but either Iran hasn't sent that word or the Houthis are ignoring it.
All right, David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thank you.
Sure thing.